Take your seats, movie fans. The film is about to start. Welcome to Craft Disservices, the show where we look at the bad films of cinematic history, the movies that critics rejected but audiences embraced. I'm your host, Aaron Coker. I'm the host of the Just Enough Trope podcast as well, and the Enterprising Individuals podcast on this, the Just Enough Trope network. You can find out more at justenoughtrope.com. Joining me once again on the show today is writer and movie critic Mark McPherson of movieswithmark.com and moviespoon.com. His new book, The Horrors of Anime, is a collection of over 30 essays on some of the worst anime ever produced. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Possibly going to get worse as we talk about this film, but hopefully we'll all survive the experience. Have you seen any good movies lately? How is 2018 shaping up for films?
There's actually been a lot of surprising films that are going to be very high on my list. Like it's like, again, like, you know, the earlier the year, it's become like there's a lot more better films. So we're kind of in like the summer slog right now. But
yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's been a pretty damn good year so far. There's a lot of films that I'm going to be watching over and over at this point. Stuff like Annihilation and You Were Never Really There and stuff like that.
Yeah. I was surprised about, well, I guess I understand the politics of it, but I was surprised that Annihilation didn't hit as big as it wanted to. And of course, the distribution was strange because it basically only came out here and then it was Netflix, you know, everywhere else.
It was essentially ruled that that Paramount thought that the long and short is like they thought audiences would be too dumb. So they didn't want to.
Thank you so much for that, Paramount. Other than them studios thinking that audiences are dumb, do you see that happening with future releases that don't necessarily have a rock-solid audience?
Well, I think it depends. Like, we're in this weird spot now because right now, like, the hugest moneymaker right now is Disney. Yeah. And that's because Disney, they've made more money in like the last half of the year than they've like ever made. And I think what comes with that is it's mostly more like room for like experimentation in there. Okay. Because that's the reason why like movies like Black Panther and like Infinity War are doing so well right now after like 10 years of Marvel films, is because they have like the leeway to explore. So I think. Yeah. I think that's because that's the thing. Like, I think Disney right now has enough leeway where they can explore like different films, see how stuff works. That's why they can try stuff like A Wrinkle in Time and like a little spin-offs that they're doing with Star Wars. Some of them might work, some of them might not, but they're trying to go out there and take other chances with it. I think that it's going to be kind of weird, like especially because like the biggest film that's probably going to be this year is probably going to be Jurassic World. And I think I think you're going to see like what lasts and what doesn't, because I was thinking that, you know, Marvel films have gone up in how much money they're making, and you look at something like Transformers, which has been around for the same amount of time, and that's gone down. Yeah. And I think it's because it's running out of ideas. You know, it's kind of running on just like the notoriety of it. So as long as, you know, like, because everyone has these big concerns about these big blockbusters, you know, just like charging out the same stuff or being stupid. As long as they can keep going, if they can keep experimenting and taking chances, you know, I think that's what Disney's learning right now. And that's kind of what I hope they learn from like The Incredibles 2, because like The Incredibles 2 is the hugest performing Pixar film. Yeah. And like, I love that because I absolutely adore like Pixar and especially The Incredibles and Brad Bird directing. I just hope they take away the right thing from this, which is, let, you know, Brad Bird get on another project and don't just force him into The Incredibles 3, because he doesn't want to do The Incredibles 3.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it seemed like he didn't want to do The Incredibles 2 for a long time.
Oh yeah, he doesn't want to come back to stuff if he doesn't have ideas, because they were saying like, oh, we should do like, you know, like Ratatouille 2, and it's like, or The Iron Giant 2. I don't want to do these films. I want to do new films that explore more. So. Yeah.
Speaking of animation, your book, The Horrors of Anime, deals with absurd elements in anime, and God knows there's more than a few. My question is, why does it seem, at least it seems to me, that anime is so weird, and at its best, it's so imaginative? I mean, we have sci-fi and cartoons here in the West, and they're usually defined by being imaginative or absurd, but they don't seem to hold a candle to the ideas and images that you find in Japanese anime.
Well, I think that's because there's this kind of it's kind of like run like this cult wave pretty high of like, you know, what you can do with animation. I think that's mostly due to the desire to do more and experiment, even if it seems too weird and even if it fails. Because I remember, I think it was like Tezuka Studio who did like stuff like Astro Boy and stuff like that. He made a film called Cleopatra. Which was kind of it was kind of like this weird, almost kind of like, it had like a sci-fi edge to it of trying to portray the legend of Cleopatra. And it was very dark. It was very weirdly humorous. There were like pistols. He had like cameos by Astro Boy. There was tons of sex and tons of violence and tons of humor in it. Okay. And it failed horribly, but it was there because he said, like, I don't just want to do Astro Boy. I don't want to do kid stuff. I want to make funny stuff for adults. I want to explore more stuff. And it came out during a time when, animation was kind of experimental. There was stuff like Yellow Submarine and Fritz the Cat coming out at the time.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what's defined anime is this need to explore like different types of genres and see what sticks, because sometimes some of it does. And that's like the thing, like it's kind of like bred this kind of weird crowd that kind of expects the weirdness, that kind of expects stuff to be like absurd and exaggerated to extreme degrees, that it's kind of bred its own little either like kind of like medium or genre from that.
Yeah. There's a lot of movies that we have that are mainstream successes here, like you mentioned Transformers before, that are based on animation, and when you think about it, are essentially like a live action cartoon. So I love the fact that the Japanese don't treat animation as something for kids necessarily, and yet we don't seem to be able to break through that here in the West. Like if it's a cartoon, if it's drawn, then it's automatically for kids.
We kind of do. I mean, the thing is, I think we do, but I think it's kind of like, cause like the thing is like with anime in Japan, like most of like the more like adult stuff that we talk about from there it's kind of relegated to that type of crowd for like the niche stuff. Cause like, stuff like was like Outlaw Star was on at like 2:30 a.m. in the morning when it was over in Japan, somewhere around that time. But I think, I think it makes it stick because there's more of like an accepting group of it. Like, I mean, yeah, we have huge anime groups here, but I think it's become a little bit more collective that, they can have like more dedicated shops and stuff like that over in Japan, because we do have a dedicated base. I think we kind of have this like kind of repression to animation that's not just for children, because they're like, cartoons are just for kids. Except for Family Guy, or except for The Simpsons. Except for, because there's all these exceptions that keep building up over time.
Right.
And that's how like, we almost kind of have like this weird, and I think that's kind of like the fascination of like anime, because like you see something like Sausage Party come out, which, being used to like adult animation with stuff like Fritz the Cat and Heavy Traffic and stuff like that, the Sausage Party just kind of like, it's another Seth Rogen movie. It's got a few clever ideas. It's the same style of writing and all that. So it's the same type of deal, except it's an animation. But for everyone else, it's like, man, I've never seen crazy shit like this in animation.
Yeah, right. I was trying to explain to my girlfriend last night what Cool World was, and I was like, this is going to take a while. I don't think this is going to work.
Well, at the time, it was described as like I remember it's just like some press event they described as like, it's like Roger Rabbit, only better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Roger
we all
Rabbit
know
for adults. Yeah.
Except Roger Rabbit was for adults.
Well, exactly it was. And that's how a lot of the animated shows and movies get by, is that like The Incredibles 2 is great, and there are so many themes in there that kids are not going to apprehend at all, like taking care of kids, keeping your family together.
Oh, it's an entirely an adult story outside of like having like the Jack is like the slapstick element. That's what glues kids, but ultimately the story is just about parents trying to deal with the fact that that their world is changing, and that they have weird shifting roles that they got to adjust to.
Right.
Which is why it's probably Pixar's most like adult film. Like, because like I was trying to think of ones that are more adult that focus on parents before that, and the only thing I can think of is The Incredibles, just because it deals with that part of growing up. Even though there's stuff like like Up and Finding Nemo, which do focus a little bit more on passing and stuff like that. But in terms of like dealing with stuff that feels more I guess more relatable to like the immediate of kind of like my kind of like growing demographic, that's kind of where it's at.
We were both at Convergence Con recently, and we were on a panel about guilty pleasures. That is a movie that you really like, but you know it's not thought of as typically good. What's your definition of a guilty pleasure film?
Well, it's kind of tough because I've heard like a few critics say like, you know, it can't really be a guilty pleasure because if you find pleasure in it, then it's really not something you should feel guilty about.
Okay.
But I guess through like the context of this, I guess it would be like, you know, a film that you really like where like either like the majority of your friends or like Rotten Tomatoes, you know, doesn't really find the same thing in it that you do.
Yeah. That sounds like a good description for the kind of films we talk about in this show.
Mm-hmm.
Last time you were on the show, we talked about Ballistic, X versus Sever. Would you call that a guilty pleasure?
In a weird way, I think for it has it's a, you know, like every you know bad film has some appeal of like, you know, like, hey, don't do this. So there's something to be learned from that.
Yeah. Any other picks off the top of your head for guilty pleasures?
I remember I was really alone at the time and liking Domino.
Oh, okay, sure.
Domino is it's such a, and I guess you really got to be a big Tony Scott fan.
Yeah, right.
To really dig Domino, because it's batshit insane. It's all over the place, and that's kind of why I liked it, and that's kind of why everyone else hated that film.
Before we get into format, I wanted to ask your opinion on something. There's been a lot of talk recently about this perceived divide between critics and audiences when it comes to film ratings. Critics and moviegoers, they don't always see eye to eye, and the gap between their opinions seems to be more of a point of contention than it's ever been. There's releases like, you know, Hereditary getting a D+ in the cinema score, but a 90 on Rotten Tomatoes. Last Jedi getting a high rating from critics and a low rating from audience on Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think is the source of that divide?
Well, it's weird. I think because from like the perspective of like the critics, I think most of them come at it from like an angle of having seen so many movies and trying to take away from that. Okay. I think because I think audiences are a little bit more like immediate, like emotional, because like with a lot of these big tentpole films, like that's like their film. Like, and the film, it has to be good at that point because like the way I look at it is like, I try to imagine like, you know, like let's say there was like, I use like Suicide Squad as an example. Like there's a Suicide Squad movie coming out and like someone's like a huge fan of Harley Quinn. So it's like, oh, this is it. This is my film. This is the Harley Quinn movie. Right. So I'm going to make a big deal of it. I'm going to get my Harley Quinn cosplay going. I'm going to reserve tickets. I'm going to go out for dinner and drinks before it. I'm going to make a huge night of it. I'm going to invite all my friends. It's going to be the best thing ever. And then you get there and you really want it to be good. and if it's not good, if it doesn't meet your requirements, it's going to be such a downgrade, and I guess the test of like your fandom too, because most of the time I think I found like if fans don't like a film but they really really do want to like it, they'll say it's okay. And I've done this too. I've done like I'm a huge Green Lantern fan, and I didn't want to admit that film was bad, but it is. I said like no they got right they got Kilowog right. It's like nah, it's bad. And it's okay. It's okay to admit that that you're a fan of something and they did a bad movie. It's happened to all of us.
Yeah, I think Cinema Score really supports your interpretation, because I've noticed that it's either feast or famine. Like many films will get an A or a high B, or it's D or F. Like there are very few B minuses or like C's. Like people walk out of a film going,
oh, especially with horror.
Oh, interesting.
Horror is particularly well because like we have like this weird kind of like we have so much different horror films out there right now that I think sometimes people get like this lost idea of like what horror is supposed to be, because like typically I think they might think something like, you know, like Annabelle, which is kind of like roller coaster jump scare horror, and then you've got kind of more like depressing type stuff like It Comes at Night or Hereditary, and I think like it's weird to kind of recommend that to people and for them maybe to accept it either, because like, you know, horror is weird for some people, like because it's weird because like we for a lot of people who grew up out of like, you know, like the gore porn era of like the 2000s,
sure,
they're like oh I don't want to admit that I like horror. That's like the Saw films and the Hostel films. I don't want to admit that. So when like a really good film like, you know, like Get Out or Hereditary or It will come along, they don't want to admit that it's horror.
Interesting. Okay. So it's just like a thriller or something instead?
Yeah. I think there's I forgot who made it, but there's some like old joke that, the difference between a horror and a thriller is that thrillers win awards.
Okay. Right, sure.
Because Silence of the Lambs won some Academy Awards, and like people like, oh no, it's not really horror, it's a thriller.
Right. We wouldn't step to that. No, this is a thriller film. Yeah, of course. Well, our film today features a gap in appreciation from both critics and audiences, and it also has horror elements, or perhaps thriller elements to it. And it stands as an odd memorial to the hypothetical directing career of Dan Aykroyd. We're talking today about the movie Nothing But Trouble from 1991. And we'll talk in a moment about the writer, director, and star of the film and what was going on behind the scenes. But first, can you give us a synopsis of Nothing But Trouble?
Oh, God. Well, let's see. The best way I can describe it is that I'm trying to remember. Like Chevy Chase plays, is it like a investment banker? I think something like that.
I think that he makes
a journalist, isn't he?
Yeah, he makes the distinction that he's a financial reporter. And I think that knowing the markets, he can reap the rewards of investment, but he's not an actual banker.
Yeah. So yeah, he's kind of playing like this kind of, his typical, kind of like smarmy type self.
Yes.
And he invites a whole bunch of people to go on a road trip for some new venture. And along the way, they get pulled over by John Candy's character, who says like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to take you folks in here." And that's when they get taken to the courthouse of, I guess. I'm trying to find the best way to describe this. They're basically brought to like Beetlejuice land. And they're introduced to Dan Aykroyd, who plays this judge who looks like the most disgusting thing you could ever imagine Dan Aykroyd looking like, is the best way to describe that.
And somehow the Digital Underground is involved.
Yes, the Digital Underground will show up for no reason at all, other than the fact that we need some music.
Yeah, right, exactly. This movie, that's a pretty good synopsis of the plot, I think. And I've heard that it is... I've heard a couple different things. I've heard that it's based on an actual experience of Dan Aykroyd, that he was pulled over for speeding in a rural town, like in the Northeast. Mm-hmm. And something like this happened. I mean, not all the fantastical elements. There was no Mr. Bonestripper, but he was taken to a local justice of the peace, like in the middle of the night for a quick trial, like we see in this film here. Which is weird enough, I suppose. I also think that I think it's clear that this is some kind of send-up of the type of the Psycho or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or even like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, that type of film. People, getting ganked when they're, in the middle of nowhere or on vacation, which is a really popular theme. And of course, it's come back now in the form of, like you mentioned, Saw or Hostel. I feel like those type of movies are still hanging on.
Yeah, it's classic, horror movie type send up, and it does go into that territory because this kind of came out like I mentioned, like Beetlejuice, like this kind of came out in like the age of the early '90s where films had to be a little bit more gross, they had to be a little bit more mean. I don't know if Ren and Stimpy played a role in that. They might have, but but you saw all these like films like trying to duplicate stuff, like trying to be like over the top with like production values and gross out stuff. Like honestly, like I try to find more films, but honestly, like Beetlejuice is like the biggest thing that comes to mind because this mansion is it's like a Pee-wee's Playhouse horror fest.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like a huge Rube Goldberg murder machine. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the production value. There was plenty on this film. It cost $40 million. Which
was huge at the time.
Especially for a comedy. Yeah. And it only made $8.4 million at the box office. So not much of a return on that. It was released on February 15th of 1991. And just to go through the ratings, it's at a dismal 5% on Rotten Tomatoes. The film doesn't actually have a Metacritic score, and I'll talk in a second about some of the difficulties I had finding reviews of it. It's at a 4.9 on IMDb, and adding in our cinema score here, it was a D+ on cinema score, so the audience seemed to weigh in saying, not so good either. I've seen this film a couple of times now, and every time I come away thinking, what were they thinking? Like, am I supposed to laugh? Am I supposed to be scared? Should I want a hot dog? Should I swear off of hot dogs after this film?
Not going on roller coasters.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope you can help me to figure out how to feel today. Why did you want to talk about Nothing But Trouble on the show?
I think just because I find it like there's so many baffling elements that came together to make this happen. Like, why did Tupac Shakur make this the debut for him to come out? Why did Dan Aykroyd decide to direct this film and then appear in it with so much caked on makeup?
Yes.
To make everything look grotesque, and
in
that's
several
not even
different roles as well.
Yeah, like that's like his role as the judge is not the most disgusting role in the film somehow.
No.
like I said, like I was trying to figure out how this came together, and like you mentioned, yeah, there was the time he was pulled over. I don't know how viable this was, but someone else also mentioned that apparently he just got the idea of like, how funny it would be to see John Candy in drag, and that was enough for him to write in there.
And poor John Candy, I mean, who's just doing sort of thankless work in this film. And is in one part barely in it, as the son or the grandson of the judge. And then he has to just be in drag for the rest of the film. He doesn't talk at all. It's like, he deserved better.
I was surprised how much, I guess I was almost surprised, how much they didn't rope him into the film. Because there's one particular role where Dan Aykroyd plays one part of a duo that is extremely disgusting. And I thought, oh, that's for sure going to be John Candy under all that crap.
Yeah, right.
Because I thought, the film has gone this low, it might as well be him in there as well.
Yeah, and it's not. And we'll reveal who it is in a second. But I think that this is definitely an example of Aykroyd. Well, he's clearly having fun, but he's also... I've always seen him as somebody who wanted to really push boundaries. Like you hear stories about how... so he wrote this film. His brother, Peter Aykroyd, also has a story credit. And, of course, Peter Aykroyd appears in the film as Mike the Doorman for a small role. You hear about when Aykroyd wrote the Blues Brothers, he wrote, they told him to write the script. He brought it to the producers and it was 600 pages long. And there were just side characters, the Henry Gibson Nazi character had a whole subplot and a whole focus. And they told him it can't be this long. This isn't a film. And he said, well, you just cut it down to a film and drop whatever you want. I've heard about when he was on Grosse Pointe Blank. He played the character Grosser, who's a killer that works with what's his name? Just for Men guy.
Oh God.
As I get older, yeah, I'm way past my 10-year reunion. John Cusack, that works with John Cusack. And he's just kind of a normal guy. He's kind of dorky, and he wants to portray John Cusack. But he had all these ideas for the character would be this gay Slavic dude. He'd be like a Arnold Schwarzenegger type with bleached hair, and he'd keep bringing all these ideas. And they're like, it's okay. We don't need all that. That's fine. It seems like he wants to really push the boundaries, of comedy, and I respect that. But now that he is the writer, star, and director, it's his film all the way, and. Yeah. We get this. And it's funny because since he had so many prominent roles, when it failed, I think I remember Chevy Chase saying something about this. When it failed, there was nobody else to blame or to take the responsibility. And it really led to a downturn in his career, at least in the short term.
Yeah. And you could tell, from what I've heard, apparently it was one of those, I think I might have written this in my review too, but I think at one point he was kind of admitting I kind of knew it was bad. I mean, he mocked the show later on his own show. Okay. And I think he kind of knew it was kind of bad, but I think he just went along with it, because Dan was his friend and he wanted to, help him out with comedy. But I think I wrote in my review, friends don't let friends put penises on their nose. So
I've got that on a pillow somewhere, I think. Yeah, it's just too bad. If you look at his IMDb page, he's got a couple solid films. He wrote Blues Brothers, Ghostbusters, classics. Spies Like Us, good, not great, but good. Dragnet, same thing. And then it hits Nothing But Trouble, and there aren't many credits after that until Blues Brothers 2000.
No.
So this is kind of, there was the end of his directing career and kind of the start of the decline of his writing career as well.
Yeah, I think it's because he's one of those guys who's too brilliant with his comedy that his brain kind of
he's on another level.
Yeah, kind of not that he's kind of completely off the edge, but his brain is kind of fried where he's got way too many ideas that are coming off the screen.
Yeah, sure, right.
And that's totally Nothing But Trouble. This is where nobody decided to chop down the script or tell him maybe you shouldn't put the penis on your nose for some reason.
Right.
Because there's no reason for that scene.
Everybody needs that guy to tell you, no penis on the nose. Yeah. I think both Ivan Reitman and John Landis turned down the opportunity to direct the film. So it might have been, and I don't know if those were official offers or just them being in, that circle. They were like, nah, I don't think so. So maybe it was a role that he was sort of forced into. But yeah, it's still, he's left holding the bag.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just because like the friend, they're good buds and everything. So I imagine he wanted to help him out with his film. He just couldn't say anything, and apparently he was so frustrated that he called up like his other friends between takes just to like voice frustrations because he's like, it's like like kind of like screaming into the pillow off screen. It's like, excuse me a minute, Dan, I gotta.
Let's see here. Chevy Chase, of course, plays Chris Thorne in the film, and I got like some Ty Webb vibes from this guy. Like if this was if Ty Webb gave up his golf membership and then sort of lived on a few more years. It's that same kind of role that Chevy has, where I don't think he always has to have like a financial advantage, but he's definitely has an advantage over the characters. He's sort of like sitting in an elevated position, kind of looking down.
Yeah, and I think he's just kind of like admiring just how bizarre this all is, because he can be really good in roles, but it just kind of feels like he's just kind of like autopilot here.
Yeah,
like his typical roles.
Demi Moore is in the movie as Diane Lightson, the romantic interest, and somebody who is just literally along for the ride. And this is strange. This is probably the last movie that Demi Moore had to do before she was able to get her pick of roles. This is literally coming off of Ghost, which was, of course, huge for her. And then after this, she would go into... I mean, the 90s were, her decade for the most part. A Few Good Men, Indecent Proposal. I think around the time of Striptease, she became the highest paid female star in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So it didn't really slow her down, this film. But in this movie, I can't tell if she is good or if she's barely keeping up. Like, I know, like you said, like Chevy Chase hated the script. And I think he figured once he got on set, they could make it funnier through improvisation. But Demi doesn't have the improv gifts of Chevy Chase or a Dan Aykroyd. And there's parts in the film where she gets close to like a almost like 30s screwball feel in what she does. And there's other times where she's just kind of there. And I don't think that she really, there's a lot of things going on that aren't great in the movie. I don't think she's the worst part of the movie, but I'd probably put the blame on Aykroyd as the director, like not trying to sort of get more specific things out of her.
Well, I think what he wanted out of her, which I almost kind of admire for her, is like she's kind of more mostly to represent like the audience.
Yeah.
Because like I almost kind of like her because she's kind of that reminder that like, no, this isn't like typical. You should be freaked the hell out by all of this that's going on. Right. She's the only one who's really being terrified by all this. Like Chevy's just kind of like cracking jokes along the way, and there's another couple who are also kind of making jokes along the way. They're not terrified by the fact that they could be launched into a roller coaster that's going to chop off all their skin. So
right, yeah. Yeah, and like the way that they go about it, like in her character as Diane, like I think that if they had, like you said, like made her more of a surrogate and have more like honest reactions, maybe that would have worked.
Well, she should have done more like a more commentary on the situation by saying, why don't you all find this messed up?
Right, exactly, yeah. Or going completely the other. I mean, the movie literally ends with like a Looney Tunes bit. So if she went totally the other way, because there's a scene like where Alvin is, eating his dogs, and she's kind of like she's got this like huge sort of reaction that doesn't necessarily match everything else that's going on. But she is hardly the worst part of the film at all. I also wanted to mention that Valerie Bromfield is in this, who is a longtime comedic actress. People might remember her. I hope they do as the TV repair woman from Mr. Mom. She's the you fed a baby chili lady. And of course, Taylor Negron is in it. Who is a longtime comedian and comedic actor. He's really great. Well, he's okay in this. Nobody comes out really great in this.
They're trying, but there's not much.
And they're saddled. Him and Bertilla DeMoss play the Brazilianaires, and they're saddled with this weird characterization. I'm tempted to call it problematic, but it's just so strange that I don't think it's like offensive. Just confusing. Like, why did they decide to do this specific thing?
Yeah, like, because you get the feeling like, okay, they're going to be like fodder here. because
right,
because they're building them up to be like kind of like annoying. They're their luggage. They don't really need to be on this journey,
right.
And it's just kind of like a wasted opportunity.
Their bones get stripped, and then we raise the stakes at that point. Except not, because they literally just like walk out of the film.
They leave the film.
They ride a train out of the film. Yeah. And they take John Candy with them.
It's like, hey, John, do you hate this too? You want to leave the film? It's only halfway through. Yeah,
let's
sure.
go. Yeah. I wanted to mention really quick. You said that the guy in the mask, or when Dan Aykroyd is playing one of the two junkyard twins.
Yeah.
Bobo and Lil Debil, or Lil Debil, excuse me. Dan Aykroyd plays Bobo, and John Devakis plays Lil Debil. And if you don't recognize that name, there's no real reason that you should. I'm assuming, was a friend of Dan Aykroyd's. He did appear as in a bit part in Spies Like Us. And then his only other IMDb credit was for Ghostbusters. He was credited as a hardware consultant. And I had to look it up, and I still don't have a definitive answer, but I think that means that he helped Dan Aykroyd sort of conceptualize the equipment. Like, I've seen some sketches of proton packs and goggles and PKE meters and things like that.
Mm-hmm. In other words, the only person who would bother putting on that makeup.
Right, yeah.
It was like the last favor he called in.
Right. You get that late night call. Hey, buddy, I need your help on something. Yeah.
Could you wear a diaper?
Yeah. What size diaper do you wear? There's some other weird cameos in the film. Daniel Baldwin appears as I was going to say he's the fat Baldwin, but I guess it's all academic now.
Yeah.
But he appears in a group of ne'er-do-wells, and they're the characters that we do see what will happen or what can happen if you run afoul of the Valkenvania Justice Department. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we mentioned that the Digital Underground was in the film. And I don't know about you, I tried to find out why they're in this film. I think that they are a bright spot. They did release their song, same song, as a single from the film right after Humpty Dance, actually. But I don't know if there was a favor or if they were a musical act on SNL, or I don't understand the connection. I don't know why they're in this film.
I think they were trying to find a film to break out in, and I think they're not only trying to find a film to break out in, but a film where they could, play their music in too.
Sure.
They probably wanted something, kind of, I'm guessing like, their dream would have been something kind of, like Purple Rain, you can get in there. But,
yeah, right.
Pie in the sky, but I'm guessing they just want to, however they wanted to get their name out there, they wanted to, get on the big screen any way they could, and Dan Aykroyd, I guess, was open to it because he was willing to get in on the act and play the piano with them.
Yes. Yeah, he's a musical guy. Did you think that scene, strange as it is, like a lot of the film, I did enjoy. Did you think that him, Alvin, sort of joining in on the number with them was like too far, or did you think that was like fun and cool?
I think it's more kind of like bizarre than anything, because like on the one hand,
it's definitely bizarre.
Yes, it is a good scene because it is Digital Underground. You do get to hear them; they do sound awesome, but it's just. It's surreal to watch to think that like really they're in this film with creepy Dan Aykroyd makeup guy playing the piano.
And he's 106 years old. He hates everything, but yet he can still roll with the Digital Underground.
And all bankers need to die, apparently.
Right? Yeah, go suck a bug. Right? Yeah. And there's a young Tupac is in this. I guess technically this is Tupac's first film appearance.
Yeah, because he has like a big introduction. They say like, hey, how's it going? Like, what do you do? Oh, we play music. Hit it, boys, and then they go for it.
Right.
That's about the extent of his role.
Yeah. So I think this would be a good time for us to talk about some of the highlights of the film, which do exist, I believe. I love the fact that this is a reunion of sorts for people from Second City, Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase. John Candy, Valerie Broomfeld, and of course Brian Doyle Murray shows up in this, and they were all members of Second City at one time or another. Mm-hmm. Like we said, Digital Underground is in it, and they do play the wedding song, which is kind of fun. Other than that, I don't know. The only thing that I got from this, and I didn't watch this in the theater, I don't think, but I did see it on VHS at some point in the 90s. But I remember that Mr. Bonestripper is something that I took away from this. That's something that my friends and I definitely talked about a lot, having a Mr. Bonestripper.
Well, I think definitely probably the one part of this film I think that was given the most attention was the whole production of Alvin's House of Horrors. I mean, yeah, the Bonestripper is a pretty cool design. It's very intricate. It gets the job done without actually showing, like the bone stripping and all that in its own cartoonish way. You have all these weird asides, like kind of like it's his kind of attic of all the evidence and his like pit of rubber toys, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's great little creepiness elements to it like that I kind of liked. If the film could find some kind of weird I think probably what really pushed me the wrong way with the film is like I don't really understand too much of the world of, like, was it Valkenvania?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of get, okay, it's a corrupt community, it's got this weird judge, but I don't know, I kind of feel like there's more of a film there to explore other than just this one guy's crazy house.
Right. Yeah. I read somewhere, was it Empire Magazine? Somebody said that this is one of they had a top 10 list of the films of the 90s that deserved a sequel. And at first I was like, whoa, no. But then I was like, oh, maybe there's a world here that we could get into more. I liked the idea that Valkenvania I think it was inspired by the real life Centralia, Pennsylvania, which is a mining town that has been, there's a coal fire, I think, that's still going there. It's been going for like 60 years. The mines caught on fire, and so smoke will just like leak out of the ground in a similar way to what we see in Valkenvania.
Yeah, which kind of plays a role in the plot a little. So it kind of explores it. It's a little bit. There's bits and pieces of this world that's explained through there.
Yeah, there are bits and pieces all over this film that almost become part of the plot and are justified. Like, for instance, all the little Rube Goldbergs and little contraptions that he has, they make a point of saying that Alvin has an engineering degree. So you sort of get the idea of him as, like a frustrated engineer, and he's sort of taking out his frustrations with bankers and who knows who else by making these little things like the hot dog train and things like that.
Yeah, like, well, I mentioned, like the production design, I think is high. It's so high that I don't even know how they got away with this with the MPAA, but that scene where he takes off his face.
Yes.
I'm kind of like, how the hell did they get that in there for PG-13?
Right.
That is probably the most disgusting thing in the film by far. And that includes like the penis nose, which
means that was a choice then, because if it's not a real nose, then he had somebody make, or he himself made, a nose that resembles a penis. Yeah,
because I get the feeling that shot was supposed to be like he had this vision where he was going to eat the hot dog and like the ketchup or the mustard was going to like perfectly place itself to make it look like a penis, but it didn't. And so we had to go back and have like, hey guys, just flat out make it look like a penis, because it's not getting...
Because you see that in the film, like it is phallic looking, but in certain like reverse angles and like inserts, it's clearly they have done something to the prosthetic or used another one to make it explicitly.
Yeah, at first I thought it was like a dream sequence, because even the characters are like mystified that like, wait, why did it turn?
Right. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is a low light, I think, of the film for me. I just don't, it's a penis too far. I don't understand why that exists.
Well, there's already so much other grotesque stuff.
Oh yeah. It like gets lost in a wash of stuff.
Well, the characters do too. They get just lost in all these crazy production values where you kind of almost just want to enjoy like all the crazy makeup and sets more than the plot.
The hot dog scene itself it's something that if I'm eating when I'm watching the film, I have to stop eating until that scene is over. It's unsettling for sure. Although I would like a condiment train. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Honestly, I was kind of, I don't know why, but I found myself more disgusted by the Bonestripper more than anything.
Okay.
And I think it's honestly because like the stuff that creeps me out more is just kind of like when you let like the imagination run wild, it's kind of like, in like minimal horror films where you kind of let your imagination be the creepiest thing.
Sure.
That's kind of happened with me with Nothing But Trouble, because every time I see like the Bonestripper sequence, like it's just like quick shots and then it's like comical shots of skeletons being thrown out. But there's just something about that turns my stomach because you got to imagine them stripping off the bones and everything. So
right, and then they shoot out and hit the little target.
So it's grosser than even the movie thinks it is.
Yeah, they definitely went extra on the sound design for a lot of these scenes. Something that I've always found unsettling in films is infantilized adults. And when you give them troll doll haircuts and smear them in grease and put them in giant diapers, it's to another level for me.
Oh God, they look like rejected garbage pail kids.
Exactly. Yeah, they really do. And they don't. They're just a gross feature. Like, they don't really have any impact on the plot. It's not like, I think it's kind of, I like the part where Demi's character sort of bonds with them and sort of like starts like a connection with them, and you think that that's going to pay off in some way, and it doesn't. They just strap her to the thing that's going to cut her up, the watermelon chopper.
Well, yeah, at that point in the film, it's just it's spinning its wheels with finding stuff to do. It's like oh, arranged marriage. Oh, what's this? So it's like, oh,
right,
gotta best the children trolls that want to kill me. Oh. So yeah, it's just finding stuff to do at that point. That is just, like you said, like it gets lost in production values and just showcases off, like, how crazy can John Candy's makeup look when he's wearing a dress, and how and how weird would it look that they have this junkyard where they're going to toss Demi Moore into a pit of fire,
Right. And that scene where she's like getting ready for the wedding, or she's picking out her stuff. It's the scene where the girl like shows the guy something and he's like, nah. And then she shows him something else and he's like, yeah, that. Just that whole thing it has a very, there's got to be a situation where Bugs Bunny has been forced into like a shotgun wedding or something like that. That's kind of what it reminded me of, like it's a very Looney Tunesy, cartoony kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that's very evident by like even like we mentioned, like the last shot just goes full Looney Tunes.
Yeah,
yeah, you don't go full Looney Tunes.
You never go full Looney Tunes. The movie has like you mentioned, a weird pacing. Like, you think when they escape. After he gets Demi out of the chopper thing and he blows up the barrel, like that's going to be it. And then they go back in again. They go back literally to the mansion, and we get the reveal that he's got all the cops are his friends. Like, this entire county apparently is sort of on his side. And then they blow the entire house up. They get away there. And then there's another ending where they're in Miami or whatever it is, and he sees him on TV. It's like, why did they feel the need to like keep going back to the well to try to get something out of this? And
that's again, like they keep, like I said, like they keep spinning with different plots. Like the ending, they keep spinning with different twists just to keep it more crazier.
Yeah. I almost feel like we've been talking about animation a lot on this show, but I almost feel like this would be, I've heard comparisons of this to something like the Munsters. And I can kind of see that, but I almost feel like this would be served as, what if there was a show that sort of followed the Valkenheiser family, and then we see hapless people, get, taken to court or just run across them. There's not quite enough story to fill up 90 minutes or however long the film is. The fact that they have to keep going back to that, and then at the end, what the hell? We'll just have him run through a wall like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, they just spinning its wheels, because I'm trying to think like
spinning its wheels is a good
well, the roller coaster. But I'm trying to think like what else they could do with that, with like a series, because like I just think of like the other stuff that it's kind of playing off stuff like like Addams Family and stuff like,
right, because and they kind of have the reveal of what's really going on here, which is Chevy and Demi find the room where they've got all the driver's licenses or whatever, like the newspaper clippings. Like, he's been doing this for a long time. I think they find Jimmy Hoffa or something like that.
Yep. Gotta have that joke.
Yeah, that's remember that? Remember Jimmy Hoffa, everybody? That aged well. Let's check in on the state of the robot holocaust. I have a theory that if a film opens with excessive voiceover with overly long title cards, or if it opens over water, that helicopter shot where you're coming in over water and it pans up to a city line, that means that we're going to see a bad film here. And actually, on a previous show, I added that anytime the credits in a film exist within the film, or if they're rendered as if they're in the world of the film, that's something that's new or has been added with the advent of CGI graphics. If I see any of those elements, we're in trouble. And sure enough, as soon as Ray Charles's cover of The Good Life begins, we're flying in over the East River and the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan. I might add that any film that also ends with somebody breaking through the wall in a Looney Tunes fashion might be a bad film. Do you have any indicators that tip you off when you sit down, if film starts, something happens and you think, uh-oh, this might not be a very good movie?
I think the one thing that makes me dread immediately is how long they hold on a shot. Like,
interesting.
Or how long they hold on a gag. Like we mentioned, like the infamous like hot dog penis nose scene. There's an uncomfortably long holding on that shot, and you get every single person's reaction at the table to him eating the hot dog.
Right.
And I think it lasts something like about 30 seconds to a minute of them just watching him eat this hot dog in the most disgusting manner possible. Like, I don't know how Dan Aykroyd found a way to make eating hot dogs the most foul thing on earth, but
yes,
he must have worked tirelessly on that take to make it look disgusting, because bravo, man, he did it.
Yeah, and a lot of sound design goes into that too. All the squishing and the oozing sounds.
Yeah, I think the timing of the joke, especially since they initially screened this when it was still called Valkenvania, and it tested really poorly. So I'm wondering how much of that Aykroyd fought to keep it.
You think there was more?
Well, I'm debating whether or not that was how the scene was, and he fought to keep it like that, or if it was 2 minutes of people just watching him eat a hot dog.
Yeah. So anyway, it does open over water, so I don't think that we are in trouble just yet. The state of the robot holocaust for this film, let's say we're all waiting for that celebrated new upgrade for our phones, which, little do we know, is how artificial intelligence emerges and starts Judgment Day. So we're right on the brink of the apocalypse, but not there just yet. Why do you think critics rejected this, except for all the reasons that we've already said?
I think, just because I think it was baffling with its competition at the time, with what it was trying to be and where it went, and I think mostly just because of the talent involved too, because Dan Aykroyd's done some amazing stuff, he's written some amazing stuff, he's acted in some amazing stuff, and to see his directorial debut just fall flat on its face with all these gags that are have so much production values caked onto them that barely any jokes can get through without you just kind of laughing at their assembly more than how they actually function.
Yeah.
You just can't get into it. And I think that's why Roger Ebert refused to review the film. He saw it, but he couldn't bring himself to write about it.
Yeah.
And he hated it so much that apparently, and I think he's told the story. I don't know how true it is because he told the story, but apparently at the screening for it, there's barely anyone there, and he encouraged the loud teenagers that were there to be louder,
right?
So that he couldn't hear the film.
When Roger Ebert won't review it, even give it a bad review, that's a really bad sign.
Yeah, because he's gone out of his way to review films that are really terrible.
Oh yeah, to dump on them, sure, yeah. It wasn't even worth that to him.
I don't know if anyone remembers Frozen Assets from a year after that.
Oh, I don't think so. What's the plot?
Oh! No one remembers this film, and I'm surprised because it's really it was a really terrible comedy idea about this banker who's you say oh you got to manage this bank or we're kicking you out of the firm. Except what they don't tell him is, and I swear to God, I'm not making up this plot. This is real. It's a sperm bank. And he intentionally misses the fact that it's a sperm bank, so he can go in there and make all these jokes about money to people who are there to dump off sperm. Okay, was this a Shelley Long movie? Yeah, I believe it was. I think I remember a poster or a commercial for that. Yeah, it's never come out on DVD. It's only been on VHS. Oh, really? Yeah, it just came. Everyone said it was the worst film of 1992. And it just evaporated. And it's not one of those direct to video things. It was in theaters. Ebert did review it. He gave it a really horrible review. And then on Bob Costa's show in November that year, he asked what's the worst film of the year? Both him and Gene answered in unison, Frozen Assets. Wow. It's so, I hate to say, because it sounds so Hollywood studio executive ish, but I think this film lacks heart.
Like it's really mean-spirited, and I hate all the characters. And I think about something like Beetlejuice, which definitely has funnier jokes, but isn't like a great construction in terms of plot.
But you cared about the couple.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. And this lacks that. So, and Beetlejuice is also gross, and it's got all that stuff going on. But it's got a lot of charisma, of course, in Michael Keaton's performance. So it's just weird that they would mostly embrace that, and this is just no, forget it. There's just no way.
Yeah, it's too wild with like crazy stuff for the characters to do rather than actually liking the characters, and that's why Demi Moore and Chevy Chase could have been a likable couple. If it wasn't just like, Demi Moore being freaked out and Chevy Chase, raising his eyebrows and cracking jokes.
Yeah. I guess I don't scrutinize Chevy Chase performances, but most of the reviews that I've read for this, and we'll talk about some of those right now in Pick of the Patch, they say that he's just like, he's phoning it in, he's not really giving his all. And he's definitely not at Caddyshack level, but I didn't sense that he was just really checked out.
Well, no, and I think it's because, I think it might not have come through on the screen because he's struggling to, because this is a role where he's meant to react, which he's good at reacting, but I don't think I think he's almost kind of like having like too much fun with it, where I think like he should be more freaked out. He's just kind of given that kind of like, oh, isn't that a little bit odd that we're in a rubber toys,
Like his deadpan, that's why you hire him. Like when they see the sign that says no cursing, he's like, oh shit, like that's a Chevy Chase bit. Or I like the bit when they're running away at one point in the film and they open the door and all these, like the room is just chock-a-block with toy babies, like baby dolls.
Yep.
He's like, it must be the nursery. Like that's what you hire Chevy Chase for.
They're not bad bits, but they're kind of like little throwaway bits that just kind of get lost in everything else going on.
Right, we've got to get back to the pickle shooting train.
Oh, yes.
That's what's on display here. Well, it's not hard to find a negative review of this film, but in fact, it's hard to find reviews at all, at least ones that were written near its release. Like you said, Roger Ebert famously refused to write a review of the film. And as I said previously, the film doesn't even have a Metacritic score. But I did find a New York Times review by Vincent Canby written in 1991. And he says that Mr. Aykroyd's screenplay is an accumulation of loose narrative ends and lines that don't even cheer when they're thrown away. Which I think fits. He also mentioned that there was few people in the cinema and there's virtually no laughter from beginning to end, though there may have been some silent smiles. Chris Hicks of the Deseret News said in 1991 that Aykroyd is like a child with too many toys and too much freedom, and the resulting chaos rules the movie. And he also adds that Chase, Candy, and Moore appear much less animated than usual and downright embarrassed in some scenes.
Yeah, they're pretty much right.
Yeah, which I think we do see in Chevy Chase's performance. Not everybody was 100% critical. Peter Rainier was writing for the LA Times in 1991, and he gave a review that I would characterize as honest but encouraging. And he said, if you're in the mood to be clobbered with stale jokes, it might seem fitfully amusing. Occasionally, the talents of the cast burn through the haze of misfires and remembered routines.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, it was actually IFC that listed Nothing But Trouble as one of 10 90s comedies that really need sequels. And I actually found a BuzzFeed article about the film written about 5 or 6 years ago that called it, it was called The 16 Most Traumatic Things About Nothing But Trouble, which I think, I think that's fitting.
Oh, yeah. You know what would be interesting what if they did like kind of like a Devil's Reject style sequel?
Okay.
Because then we turn the tables on Alvin, and then Alvin is going to have to react to a world where he's not as up on the binge, and he's got to find other creepy and gross people to associate with.
Okay, I see. Kind of The Hills Have Hot Dogs kind of thing.
Yeah, we got the title.
Do you think that this film would have benefited more from going darker? Like we mentioned that I don't think any of the people, we don't see anybody die. Like we see a lot of bones. There's a lot of suggestion of murder. Of course, Daniel Baldwin and his group, they get offed. But if we saw them sort of get knocked out one by one, and either Chevy Chase or Demi Moore becomes the final guy or girl in the situation, like if it leaned into the horror element of the horror comedy, would it have been more successful?
If they could have found funny stuff to do
funny
with
ways to die.
Yeah, like they could find like gory ways to die, but there would have to be like a good capper to it, or they'd have to be like an amusing method to their death. Like the Bonestrippers is it's kind of a funny idea if they could find more funny ways to kill people along it. But if they just flat out put gore in there, I think it'd just be more baffling than anything.
I was thinking like a cabin in the woods kind of thing, sort of a humorous Joss Whedon sort of aspect to it, but yet it's there's something else going on.
Yeah, if it put more of its tongue in its cheek rather than on the hot dog, then yeah.
Sure. Tongue or hot dog in cheek. Absolutely. Well, would you ultimately recommend this film? Do you think that this is a masterpiece or a disaster piece?
I think it's kind of more of a disaster piece. I think the only thing I'd say it's worth watching for is to watch the beginning and the end of Dan Aykroyd's directing career.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, the single example of his directing career. I don't know. I don't hate this film, absolutely. I would say that the best parts probably can be seen in YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. I know the Bonestripper scene, a lot of the scenes are on YouTube. Maybe as a cautionary tale or like what not to do. But I think by the time 91 rolled around, like there's this whole kind of die yuppie scum kind of thing. Like the whole movie starts and, Ray Charles is singing We're in the Upper West Side, and you get no idea of where it's going. And I know they did that on purpose, but it's got a real anti-yuppie thing that I think was already kind of played out by 91. Of course, 92, Bonfire of the Vanities came out, and that was a big failure as well. So it's kind of a film out of its own time. But I have trouble saying no, avoid like the plague. But maybe don't eat during the hot dog scene.
No, it's if you really want to see something like repulsive, if you love the gross, and we to be honest, we kind of did love the gross back in the early 90s. I mean, we had Nickelodeon, and we had we still had slasher films, and we had Addams Family and all kinds of weird gross stuff going on. So if you want to get like, I guess, kind of like a sour taste for the era, that's kind of what we had.
Yeah, we didn't have the internet back then, so there was no Two Girls, One Cup. It was just one old man and many, many dogs.
Yeah, if we wanted to throw up, we had to go watch Dan Aykroyd eat stadium pranks.
Right. Well, I think that's it for us. Listeners, thanks for joining us. If you want to let us know how you felt about this movie, you can tell us on Facebook at facebook.com/Craft Disservices. We're also on Twitter at Craft Disservice, no S. And we're on iTunes. You can search for Craft Disservices there and subscribe, rate, and review us. That really helps us out a lot. We're also on Google Play and Stitcher and all those great places. Mark, where can people find you online?
They can find me at movieswithmark.com. They can find me at I write for TwinCitiesGeek.com and moviespoon.com. I'm also on twitch.tv/movieswithmark, which I do movie reviews on there. And you can find my books on Amazon, like The Best, Worst, Weird Movies of the 90s, which has nothing but trouble in it, and you can probably guess where it falls in there.
Yeah, at least you wrote something about it, so you're one up on Ebert there. Any other things that you're working on or books that you've got in the pipe?
Yeah, I'm planning on finishing up. I did a book on the 90s film, so I'm going to plan on doing a book on the aughts, so 2000 to 2009.
I like that you say aughts. I've heard recently somebody much younger than me say naughties, so I don't know if that's the thing now or if we still have a chance to keep that from becoming the thing.
I think it was aughties, and then it transformed into naughties.
Aughties. Oh man, that's even worse.
So they tried to fix it.
Yeah. Okay. So on this show now and forever, it'll be the aughts.
Yes.
Well, check out Mark's books online and follow him, especially The Horrors of Anime. And that is it for us. The credits are rolling. This is Aaron for Mark saying, go suck a bug!